Our next guest is Richard Winger. Richard Winger is definitely not a household name, but he's a very important name in the world of politics. He's the nation's leading expert on ballot access. And ballot access may not sound like a sexy topic to you, but I'll tell you, ballot access is an incredibly important topic. It's an increasingly important topic because think about it, the people that are holding office today, the incumbents, they don't want challengers, and the parties don't want challengers. They don't want people on the ballot. Surprisingly, Richard's been an expert and been doing this for how many years, Richard?
40 years.
40 years. So he's definitely ahead of his time by any stretch of imagination. And I'm going to embarrass Richard because I want to read about him from the Wikipedia site. It says, Richard Lee Winger is an American political activist and analyst. He is the publisher and editor of Ballot Access News. He sits on the editorial board of Election Law Journal. Winger publishes analysis, statistics, and legal information and supports more equitable laws allowing for access to the ballot for minor parties. Winger is regarded as an expert on ballot access and election law. Though not a lawyer, he testifies in court cases and legislative hearings and is a source for media and political organizers. He's been published in the Wall Street Journal, Journal of Election Law, the Fordham Urban Law Review, American Review of Politics, California Journal, and other publications. He's appeared as a commentator on ballot access on NBC, ABC, CNN, and NPR. Since 1985, Richard has published Ballot Access News, a monthly newsletter covering developments in ballot access law and among minority parties. Richard, I can't imagine a better lead-in. I mean, your record speaks for itself, and the fact that you are this amazing nugget of political wisdom, I just find just amazing. What got you started, and what was the impetus for all these activities?
When I was an undergraduate at UC Berkeley, I was just fascinated by people who had political views that were very much in the minority. There were only 3 active minor parties that ran nationwide in the early 60s. There was the Socialist Workers' Party, which was Trotskyist, the Socialist Labor Party, which was even older, you could call it De-Leonist, and the Prohibition Party. And these 3 groups were so far removed from the mainstream that I wondered how can these groups, the members, maintain their belief system? And also I wondered who are the people who are voting for these parties, because they got surprisingly large votes. So I set out to analyze the election returns. But I was a Californian, and I was frustrated because in California there were no minor parties on the ballot. But these parties were on the ballot in many other states. So I thought, that's odd. Seems to me if it's a national party, it should be on the ballot all over the country. So then I got interested in the ballot access laws, and they were so fascinating I never stopped being interested in them.
So is this a full-time occupation for you, or an avocation? Where does this fit into your life?
Well, I was lucky enough to be able to quit my day job in 1985. That's when I started Ballot Access News. That's my monthly newsletter. So it's been full-time since 1985.
And of course, I was talking to you earlier this week, and we were trying to schedule for this interview, and you said to me, I'm going to be testifying tomorrow. So talk about what it is that when you testify, and how the fact that you are respected as an expert in this topic.
Well, I'm just kind of lucky because I was so interested in election returns when I was young. I ended up getting the election returns for all federal and state office for all states for the whole 20th century. And I just couldn't help but learn a lot about what kind of ballot access laws help minor parties and what kind of ballot access laws hinder them. So I have the store of historical knowledge, plus I've researched the ballot access laws all the way back to their beginnings. So in court, sometimes it helps to have somebody who knows all that stuff, and that's what I testify about.
So you're mostly testifying about the history of ballot access when you're testifying?
Yes. Yesterday, I was deposed for Ohio. Ohio legislature last month passed a bill removing the 4 qualified minor parties from the ballot and saying if they want to be back on the ballot, they have to get 28,000 valid signatures in the next 8 months. And I had a lot of evidence that in the past, when states make the ballot access laws harder, they generally at least ease into it. They pass it, but they say, but it won't take effect for a year. Well, Ohio wants to make its new restrictions take off right away. So my role was to show that that's not normal behavior.
So, of course, Richard, I know you read my book, E-Party, and you gave me a nice plug in your newsletter. But one of the topics in E-Party is the fact that the major parties will use restrictions on either petitioning or ballot access to keep people from running for office. So what are you finding today? Is this a growing phenomenon? You meant like the Ohio legislature just wakes up one day and says, let's keep them off the ballot? What's going on here?
Well, more and more every year, minor parties and independent candidates are getting stronger. And you see the quality of people who want to run as independents or minor party nominees isn't improving. So the major parties are feeling more and more threatened. They were not feeling threatened much in the 80s. And then Ross Perot kind of surprised everybody, but he really was only a challenge in the presidential race. And of course, the Reform Party also won the Minnesota governorship in 1998. But generally, the Reform Party didn't offer a strong alternative to the major parties across the board in congressional races and state races. But just last year, 2 independents were elected to the U.S. Senate, one in Maine and one was reelected in Vermont. Also, in 2010, Rhode Island elected an independent governor, and the winner of the U.S. Senate race in Alaska, Lisa Murkowski, although she's still a Republican, she won in write-ins. She was not the Republican nominee. Also, last year, 25 people were elected as independents or minor party candidates to state legislatures, or governors.
Now, in most cases, are they having a higher standard to get on the ballot? Is it being much more difficult for them to get on the ballot in the first place?
Well, ballot access started out really, really easy, and it got much harder in the 30s, and it really got harder in the 60s. But since 1985, we've slowly been making gains. Overall, the ballot access laws are somewhat easier now than they were in the mid-80s. But we have had some recent setbacks, and in some states, there are recent changes that are very harmful. It's hard to generalize for the whole country.
And I know, again, you've made quite a study of this. And I don't know this, by the way. Have you written books on this topic? If someone wanted to go read one of your books, are they available somewhere?
I wrote a book, but it hasn't been published yet. It was pretty wonkish. It was written in 1997. It has all the ballot access changes for every state for all history. And I was hired to do that by the Brennan Center, and I was paid for it. But they wanted a book that had a more popular appeal, so they never published it. So I'm hoping to figure out some way to get it published.
But in the meantime, you've got your monthly newsletter. And what other communication do you put out for people who want to know more about ballot access stuff?
Well, the newsletter goes on my blog, Ballot Access News. So people who go to that site can see past issues of the printed newsletter. Plus, I blog, so when things happen, you can read that. Typically, I have 2 or 3 blog posts per day.
And then how do you compare, one last question, how do you compare what happens in the United States in terms of ballot access with what goes on around the world? Are we more restrictive, less restrictive, kind of the same?
We're just about, among countries that are considered to have free elections, we're just about the worst country in the world. I mean, I cannot understand why Americans don't pay more attention to Great Britain, our mother country, and Canada, which is our neighbor and the country that most resembles the United States. Neither Great Britain nor Canada have these problems. In Britain, you get on the ballot for House of Commons with 10 signatures and a filing fee. In Canada, you get on the ballot for their parliament with 100 signatures and a filing fee. And every candidate is treated exactly alike.
Go ahead. That's just fascinating. So in our remaining time, why don't you again remind everyone how they can find your website, get access to your ideas, and anyone who wants to drill down and get wonkish, as you called it, in the world of ballot access, what do you suggest they do?
Well, these days everybody Googles things, I think. So all you have to do is Google ballot access news. But if you want the exact address, it's ballot and then a hyphen or a dash, whatever you call it, access.org. And all my contact information is up there.
And I am a subscriber, and if I remember correctly, you're one of the great values in Western civilization. It's just a dollar or so a month, right?
Well, for the regular subscribers, it's $16 a year for 12 issues. Sometimes I let new people on for $12 a year.
I think you charged me 16. You shouldn't have told me that.
Uh-oh. I shouldn't have told you.
Well, anyway, I think your publication is a great value. I think you are an amazing nugget of political wisdom. And for anyone who wants to become involved in politics, it's so important to understand these subtle ways in which our democratic society has become limited. So thanks for your time today, Richard, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, Stephen.